got a brand new razor and I've split out the whole top block, got the fuselage marked here. I don't know if you can see this where my hand is here. Fuselage marked. Put that off to the side. The whole bottom block, the hole cut where the tune pipe's going to exit. Next step on this guy is going to be to trim this off and hollow it out. I've got the whole crutch itself here in one piece. You could really just peel this off with your fingers. All this does is get off the little dots that we had the blocks tacked on with hot stuff. Get a nice clean edge to work with. This will make it a little bit easier to get a nice joint when we join the blocks on permanently. A couple dots of hot stuff down there and by the rubber mount, we'll have to get rid of that. You can see the little carbon fiber supports that we have back here, where the carbon fiber is running back. Oh, I love this sound. What we're doing is truing up these edges, setting the parts aside. The next step on this is going to be hollowing. Try to get all the edges trued up. And what we have right now, I'm going to lay this out so you can get an idea of what it looks like. We got the fuselage crutch. I got the block hollowed out. The bottom block. And these are pretty much ready to go. The hollowing will be the next step. Now what I do to make it a little bit easier to hollow, I try to get a line 1/8 of an inch off the edge down the whole block. And I'm just drawing a line 1/8 of an inch down the edge with a ballpoint pen. This is just going to be a reference guide for when I start my hollowing. I'll do this to the top and the bottom block both. I'll leave a little extra meat up by the nose. No reason to make the nose all super hollow or anything. And if you make the blocks too thin, I've made blocks so thin that they wouldn't maintain their shape after you dope them. That's no good either. You're looking for about 1/8 of an inch of wall thickness. Good idea to do is just hold it up against a 100-watt bulb and see when it starts to get pink and you can see through it. You know you're getting close. Don't get too carried away. If you leave a little extra meat in the blocks, I don't think it's the end of the world. If you make them too thin, they're going to be ripply, and you'll need a lot of extra finish just to finish them in, get them level again, and that's a real pain in the neck. I don't know if you can see that line. Now I'll do the same thing to the bottom block, and then I'll start hollowing. Now I'll start with the bottom block, hollowing it out. I always start with a brand new one of these every time I carve a block, a new gouge blade, X-Acto blade. Once you carve a block with them, even a soft block, they lose a lot of their edge. They're cheap enough, and it makes the job a lot more pleasant when you can just take out chunks of meat at will. Now we're looking at probably maybe 2 hours each to hollow the blocks and get them sanded out. There's no point putting the whole thing on video, but I'm starting with the bottom block because once I do the top block, I want to work on a canopy. Our pilot's been drying overnight. And the top block we have to build in the canopy before we go into the next step. And I'll just start gouging this out off camera. Try to get about an hour or two into it. Again, I don't know if you can see, but we do have a line along the edge, and we go right up to that line. We're about 15 minutes into this. Give you an idea how much we got done. Working our way up the block. I always like to work from the big end to the small end. As soon as you get an indication that the blade is getting dull, get rid of it and get another one. Sometimes these blades don't really last too long if you have hard wood. This is a pretty decent piece of wood, but had I had a real hard piece, I'd need 2 blades to do a block this size. Now we're getting down to the scoop area, so we're going to have to really be careful when we go through here. We don't want to lose the edge we have on the other side. Make sure we're not distorting that edge. If you take big chunks, you risk breaking a block once it gets flimsy. Now up in the front here, I don't know if you can see this, how thin it is. It's like paper up in the front. It's getting down 3/16 1/8 of an inch. And what I'm trying to do now is get as much of this material out of the way as possible, so when I get back here, this block is going to start to get delicate like an eggshell. So I'm just going to start taking smaller and smaller chunks. I put a brand new blade in now, so I don't start getting big gouges where it sticks into the wood. Of course, if you break the block, you just have to hot stuff it together, but it's nicer if you don't have to break it. You feel a little bit more like Ski Dombrowski if you don't break it every once in a while. And if you don't go through, old Al Rabe used to say, if you don't go through in a couple spots, the block's too thick. Well, I made some pretty thin blocks that I haven't gone through on, so Al, if you're watching this, eat your heart out. Seriously, Al is a super builder, one of the people I respect most in the hobby, and I really like some of his semi-scale Mustangs and stuff. Once you get the block thin, then start taking smaller and smaller chunks out. Don't get carried away. We've got almost all of the holes carved out here. And what I got is a piece of 1/4 inch with a little bit of radius, piece of 80 grit sandpaper. I've got the whole block gouged and hollowed, and I'm just going to try to get some of the wood. Be real careful at keeping the back end nice and light. Don't want to add any extra weight behind the CG. Up front of the CG, it's not too important to keep the block light, but back here, you really don't want to have anything extra. And getting a nice smooth finish on the inside will have a double purpose, since we have to finish the inside of this block to protect it from fuel and oil and everything that might get on there if we've had a tank leak or something. The whole inside of this block will get fuel proof. Well, one of the things we want to definitely do is get the inside smooth with 400 paper, nice and smooth. Because when you have a rough surface, it picks up 2 or 3 times the amount of dope as if you have a smooth surface. So having a smooth surface in here not only is going to save weight, it's going to save weight when we go to finish the inside of this too. And we obviously don't have to put a mirror finish on this, but we do need 3 or 4 coats of dope. And maybe I'll paint the whole inside of this black so I can see where the finish is sticking. And I'm trying to get this back here real nice and thin now. I don't know if you can see how thin that is. Try to get it a constant wall thickness. It takes a little time now. We're into this block about 3 hours. And this I'm going to allow probably another hour to do the final sanding and smoothing this out with 320 or 400. You can only go so far with the gouge, and then you have to start with the sanding blocks. I have that 3/8 sanding block that I made for fillets. That'll come in handy. One thing comes in handy on doing this is a piece of ringmaster leading edge. That, for some reason, works real nice at smoothing out the inside of blocks. You can make good use out of that. I don't know if you can see that the whole thing is hollowed. We got the whole hole for the pipe exit. All it really needs now is a final sanding with 320. I think I'll take a coffee break. You can see my coffee cup has an alligator on it. I don't know if you can see this, but my lovable wife just made a nice cup of coffee for me. She knows I've been working 5 hours on this top block, this bottom block. So, don't try to do this all in one sitting. Try to take a little bit extra time, and I think you'll appreciate the little extra work. This block right now is 17 grams, and I'm going to try to get it down to about 14, which will be about a ½ ounce. And that's about what it should weigh. Back here it's real super thin. It's probably 3/32, and up here it's probably 1/8. So don't try to do it all in one sitting. I'm going to take a little break now and try to finish it up and get it down to 14 grams. Making a little bulkhead in the back of this so oil can't get to the back of the fuselage. I'm going to try to have that dovetail right into the back of the fuselage here. It's going to take a little more than that. Okay. I have this little former built in here. And this notch is right in. so it completely seals up that whole area there. And we'll just mark the inside of this so we know how far up we have to fuel proof this. Make a little tracing on the inside, show how far up that has to be fuel proofed. Too bad we can't afford a real ballpoint pen here. That's 2 pens in a row that don't write. Terrific. Let's try another one. Boy, oh boy, somebody out there send me a decent pen. Okay, this dovetails in there. Line up the back of the body. Now we should be able to get a genuine ink line here. And now we have the ink line back there. We have to fuel proof this area, but back here won't have to be fuel proofed. So what I did, I made a little template. I want to put the tail wheel in the bottom block rather than in the top of the fuselage. This way there'll be less chance oil will get in there. Made up a little template. Now I'm just trying to gauge about how far back this will have to go. Okay, that's about right. We got the tail wheel in there, and we got putting a little brace on the back. Just to beef it up, this block is really thin back here. It's probably less than a 3/32 of an inch. Now we got the tail wheel permanently mounted in there, braced up. That's part of the bottom block now too. I think the next step we're going to do is throw a coat of clear butyrate dope in here. This will stiffen it up and start to fuel proof it. Because obviously we have to have some kind of a finish in there. I'll get some butyrate dope out right now. Probably light coat would be the best, and it won't shrink. Now just to give you some idea of the different blocks, this is the block from the 87 plane. This was a concourse winning plane called Tradition. You can see this plane at one time had a tune pipe in it. Of course it was a tune pipe 60. And we had this bottom block, and you can see how it relates to how much smaller this block is than this one. This block is about 1.25 ounces, and it's finished inside with black Imron. Has the tank vents glued into it. Has some hardwood supports between the mounts. It's got a relatively, I didn't buff this out, I've been hanging this on a wall. And we're going to also do a video. By the time you see this, it'll probably be available. We're going to convert this plane over to a 40 and a 46 from a 60. But this is the bottom block from 1986. That's how long, this is 1989. 3 years ago, this block's been hanging here for 3 years. This is the glow plug hole. And we made 2 of these planes for 60 rear exhaust. Now these were things made by Craig Gunder. These attach to a Super Tiger 60. This is a muffler that goes inside the body. I don't know if you can see this. This would attach to a Super Tiger 60. This would be an in-the-body muffler. We also made a square one, which Jim Greenaway calls the mouse's coffin. This has 3 baffles in it. This was a little too restrictive. And we also had the option to run 2 mufflers back to back if we wanted to run it really quiet. This then became the for to do the testing on, and was relatively successful, but we did find out that the muffler sticking outside the body on a 60 anyway was a little more efficient than having it inside the body. And that plane, after the Nationals, it got 3rd at the Nats, won the Sheiks Award, won the Concourse Award. That plane did get converted over eventually to having the muffler outside the body. These are just some of the hardware items that we had at one time. While we're talking about headers, we may as well show this one. This is a header that converts a Super Tiger 60 to a rear exhaust engine. This is carved from several blocks. Craig Gunder did the welding on this. This showed about a 200 RPM loss, and we abandoned this as being too restrictive for a 60. We have a whole bunch of this hardware. It's interesting at this point in time to know just how this came about. We also made a muffler. This is a handmade deal to run a side mount motor that you could run the pipe inside the body and run a normal Hattori pipe. And this then became the pipe that we used with that. It was an aluminum pipe. This was 1986 technology here, 87 technology. And we had the muffler off the MiG, which exited in here and came straight out by the head fins. This was on the Model Aviation article for the MiG, shows some close-up pictures of this muffler. And we just got oodles and oodles of stuff, because I've been working on this for so many years. This is a little marine manifold that I had run at one time, just to see if there was any, and of course you could run the pipe inside the body. I think this is something like Gid Atkinson used on his. This can mount actually inside a cheap cow body. You can then put the tubing back to the muffler. So that's a nice little accessory, but there's an awful lot of this stuff people don't even know about that was developed years ago and worked on. And Billy Werwich has certainly been the most successful at getting this stuff accepted into the real world. But I have about 40 gallons of fuel burned through these 2 planes that had this option of having the side mount or in the fuselage mount. You can see how that tail wheel mounts in there. And they even had fins beyond the tail wheel to take the exhaust out. And we had a whole season of running these planes. And like I said, this one right here with this block on it got 3rd at the Nationals in 87, so it couldn't have been too bad. But this is the 89 version of that block, and it's about 1/3 the weight. So we're hoping this is going to be an improvement over the original one. Again, that's just for reference purposes. Now I've taken a jar of light coat, put in about 50% thinner, 3608S DuPont thinner. Got me out a brush. And I'm going to get a coat inside. I'm going to try to keep it off the glue joint. Just going to lay it inside the body now. Hopefully this will get it semi-fuel proof for now. What it also does, when you carve a block and you dope the inside of it, it makes it a whole lot stiffer. And should you ever get some oil inside the body, well, no problem. If you get a pinhole in a finish or whatever, it's cheap insurance. I like the dope inside the blocks. I try to keep it off the joint. Don't let it get on the joint. Again, light coat is the material of choice. Super coat would shrink and probably pull off the body, or even worse, it would tend to warp a block this thin. Remember, we've got a 14 grain block here, so you know there's not a lot of meat on the block. And we just want to get just a minimal amount of butyrate dope in here. The whole plane is going to be nitrate first, so the reason I want to get butyrate in here, butyrate of course is fuel proof, but when we actually do the wing and bring it up into silver, we're going to be using nitrate. All the outsides will be nitrate. Although another technique would be to do nitrate first in here and then cover it with butyrate. I think the butyrate will be just good enough for what we're doing right now. This will just be fine. And it'll definitely help fuel proof it a little bit. I like to let a good half hour go by before I put the second coat on. That lets that get around the edges too. And we'll even get some back here in the tail area. The reason for this is it'll stiffen up the real thin wood. Number one. Number two, if some oil gets in through the tail wheel wire, we're not going to have a tremendous problem of just soaking up oil and having it all drip and drool in here. I'll also do the inside of the fuselage here the same way, even though we're going to be concerned with this later. We can get a coat in on here. This will be real handy to have. Now, if you were to do nitrate on this, one of the problems you'll run into somewhere down the road, if you decide nitrate is what you're going to do, is you can't hot stuff onto nitrate dope reliably. So, butyrate is a good choice in this case. And again, this is not to make a fancy finish. This will stiffen up the wood. Don't want to get on the edges where we're going to hot stuff if possible. And we'll still have to brace up the inside here. But once this is all put together, it would be real difficult getting a brush into that big tunnel to get a finish in there. For this, at least, let's hope anyway, this will be a good start on getting this fuel proofed. And once it's done, we'll really only have to do the edges. I'll give that a half hour to dry. Give this a nice half hour to dry. Then we'll put a second coat on. And then we can go on to, we can go on to the top block. That old pilot that I painted yesterday is nice and dry. I've given his helmet a second coat, and I'm letting that dry right now. He's looking kind of cool though. And this should be dry now. We'll give this about a half hour. In fact, I think I'll go have lunch right now. Make you hungry. I'm going to go have some pizza. See you after lunch. Having a nice pepperoni pizza always puts me in a good mood to work on a plane. I'm giving a second coat to the inside of the cowling now. This is butyrate. I'm going to try not to get any on the outside because that's going to be nitrate. This will stiffen it up a little bit. And I'll give a second coat to the blocks. For now, I think 2 coats will be plenty on this. Eventually the whole inside of this will get painted black. I think the bottom, if I go with the trim scheme that I have in my mind's eye right now, the bottom block will be black, and that'll tend to disguise the hole where the pipe comes out. If you have a light colored airplane, this plane will probably be yellow and red, the two main colors, with some black trim. Say if the airplane was white and you have this big hole in the bottom, well hell, it's going to look terrible. It's going to look like a big toilet back there. So painting the bottom block black will, I hope, disguise some of that, or keep it to a minimum. It's one of my ideas anyway. We'll see how that pans out when we get into the finishing end of this. I've been drawing up some little sketches of trim jobs that I would like to use. I'd like to have the two main colors, red of course, and yellow, with some black in there. And what we'll do now is put these blocks aside to dry. Not much ventilation in this room, so I want to get this out of the room as soon as possible. I'm breathing a lot of this junk in. And get this out of the room, and I'll get on with doing the cockpit detail and the canopy. Now keep in mind, the Nobler video has some good thoughts and ideas on how to do a turtle deck type plane canopy. This is going to be a bubble canopy with a pilot. Of course, you have the choice of having a pilot or no pilot. Some of my planes have pilots, some have no pilot. This one is going to have a pilot. It's going to have a bubble canopy, so we're going to have to make up some little instruments, little dashboard, and we're going to have to lay it all out so the pilot doesn't sit too high or too low. So that should be an interesting part of the video if you're not familiar with making canopies. And even though that's kind of a lost art nowadays, I still like the idea. All the planes I remember from being a kid that I really liked always had a canopy, always had a little pilot in there, and it's probably going to add 3/4 of an ounce to an ounce to have that canopy option, but that's one thing I think is worth it. Okay, we're going to get this out of the room right now. A little more up here. And remember, the trick is not to get any on the edge where you're going to attach the block to the body. And it's got to take the heat that's given off by the pipe too here. We're not only protecting the wood from heat and warpage, and a little bit of fuel may get in there if one of the tubings come off or the pressure line comes off or whatever. This is just cheap insurance in here. And if you're real accurate with your weight, you're going to find out this coat of clear adds about 2 grams. So we'll probably wind up with a 16 or a 17 ounce bottom block here. Now we're going to take this out of the room now and get on with something else. And what I'm making on the fuselage here before we get into the canopy, I'm taking little strips of Velcro. These are going to hold the tank in. Here's an idea I got from Minato. And of course one will go on each side of the fuselage and these will strap together, holding the tank in. I glued them to a piece of 64th plywood, made a little trough so that we got 32nd bolts on each side, and now I'll hot stuff these right in place. If you can get Velcro without sticky glue on one side, I couldn't get it. I went to the store and I couldn't get it the other day. This has glue on one side. Just kind of wipe it off with acetone, I guess, is the easiest way. And then these will get glued right into the fuselage side, like so, and then one will strap over like a little belt and holding the tank in. Nice little idea. Now this is how we have one strap. This has the little fingers on it, and we're going to glue the other strap. Got it sandwiched into some 64th plywood, makes a nice mount. Now we'll line up the other one. Got to line them up, of course. Now here we got our little Velcro straps. Of course, when we want to take the tank out, we have to loosen up the straps. Make sure if you do one of these Velcro deals that you get it in with the the hooks and ladders all going in the right direction. It's a real super light, nice way to put the tank mount in. And of course it allows you to run all different kind of tanks. I'm putting a couple of coats of light coat up here to fuel proof this whole area. Gotta answer the phone. Alright, I let that first coat dry about a half an hour. I've got the second coat on here now. Got 2 coats on the back, so we're going to put this away now. This is kind of finished for the day. I'm going to spend whatever's left of this day. There ain't much left either. Hollowing the top block and getting the canopy ready. In fact, the last coat, I put a second coat on the old Pilot here. I don't know if you can see his eyes. He looks real shifty. Boy, is it hard to paint eyes. He looks like a real shifty character here. And he's got a yellow helmet, of course. So, okay, we're going to start on the cockpit detail and hollowing out the block. Now, one technique that anybody can use is obviously to hollow the block first. This block's not hollowed yet. I like to build a canopy right onto the top. What I'm going to try to do before I even hollow the block, so I'll have extra meat around the area so I don't get those little cracks running up into the canopy. Because I'm going to have the pipe on the bottom of the fuselage, I'm not really too worried about getting a lot of weight off the top of the center of gravity. So I wouldn't be too crazy about getting this block paper thin or anything here. But the first thing I'm going to do is make a little ditch that I can sink this canopy into, so that it just actually notches right in. Before I even start doing the details, I'll make a little notch around. I've drinking an ink pen the day before and drawing that black line, but I'll make a little ditch so that'll drop right in and give it a lot of good surface area to grip on. And before I forget, I'm putting in the rear pipe mount. This is going to be the mount. I put a blind nut on a piece of 1/8 plywood and I'm going to fit that in there. I almost forgot to do this. I want this glue to be drying and of course get a coat of clear dope on top of it. That's going to fit right in there. I'll glue that in and I can stick my coat of clear dope on it too. That's going to be the rear pipe mount, and we're going to try to get a rubber grommet or a piece of rubber here because that pipe is going to want to move a little bit with the rubber mounted engine. And it's a 440 blind nut, so we sank that mount in there, put a little brace in there. Well, we're back to doing the top block. Alright, after analyzing this whole thing out, I think what I'm going to do to save a little bit of effort, I measured off where the canopy would be. I'm going to leave this solid. I'm going to hollow out the back and hollow out the front, then finish it up by hollowing after we have the details in. It'll be a little easier for me to work on without having the canopy in a way. Of course, you could do it either way. And the only reason for doing this little bit of hollowing ahead of time, it'll be a little easier without having a canopy in place. Makes it a little easier to handle. Again, we want to get as much off of the back of this as possible. Sure don't want the back of this heavy for any reason at all. Try to get this back really thin. Of course, we'll finish it up with sandpaper. Just get the big chunks out with the knife. Okay, we've left the part where the canopy is, so we can just rough this out. This is just rough carve. Probably still can take another 1/16 of an inch out of here. Okay, the first thing we want to do is check our old pilot here. Look at them eyes. Ooh, I love them eyes. Okay. He's dry, all the paint's dry, alright. I want to see what kind of clearance. I want to see how far down into the top block I have to sink Bonzo here. I can see from here I've got to go in about a good 1/4 of an inch. Okay, that'll be just about right. Obviously we don't want his head to hit the top of the canopy. So step 1 is to sink his ass right in there. I don't know where we'll do that. He's just about the right width too. Kind of trace him out. Remember, we left all that wood underneath there, nice and solid. Now I know I have to go down in there about a 1/4 of an inch. Okay. Step 1, I want to make that before I even measure that. I want to get that canopy sunk down. I got a nice brand new X-Acto here. And I want to make that little ditch, that little trough. And then I can measure from the pilot's head up and I can get it just about right. Now I know I don't want to go up to the black line, I want to go almost up to it. And the canopy is 40 thousandths thick, so I just want to get a little less than a 1/16 of an inch. 1/16 is 60 thousandths. I get about a 40 thousandths notch in here. And by putting a nice razor cut on both sides, then I can just dig in and dig around. Just chunk it out. Try to zoom in on this. I don't know if we're going to be able to. A nice view of my gut anyway. No, the zoom is no good. Better luck next time. Take my word for it, we're going to make a nice little ditch right around the cockpit here. Put a razor cut down both sides and just chunk out the middle. Remember, we don't want to go into the black line. I want to leave the black line on there. The black line is actually further past the canopy than we are. Now that little ditch that the canopy's sitting in is going to help hold this whole thing together. If you look at some of the planes I have with canopies on them, you can see that they nice and solid. And a year later you don't see a big crack in a canopy or something crazy like that. And there's a lot of little tricks to getting that just right, whether you have a Magnum or a Nobla. And one of them is get a nice ditch. Cut that little ditch out. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on camera. Alright, I'll do the rest off camera, but we're basically going to do a ditch around the whole thing. And then make sure we can get the canopy sunk right into it. And we have the ditch gouged out with the X-Acto. And I folded back a piece of 80 grit. Made a nice little tool for furrowing into that ditch. Again, we've gone right up to the black line, but not over it. And we'll do a little test fit. Try to maintain the angle that you expect the plastic on a canopy to come in at. I would say we got about 40 thousandths here, that a little less than a 16th. Now what this does, it gives a good gripping surface to whatever glue we decide we're going to use to attach the canopy. In the old days, a good way to do this would have been put a bunch of pinholes in the bottom of the canopy all along the edge and then use ambroid. Ambroid was a good cement for holding on canopies. Okay, we've got a nice little ditch-o-matic here. Kind of do a little test fit, see if we can get it in there. And you'll see it snaps in pretty nice. That's going to be nice. Okay. And that is good and solid now. And we'll finish it up with a little piece of 320. Fold it back 2 or 3 times, get the right shape there. And of course you can do this on a Nobler or on a Magnum. Getting that little ditch in there makes the whole thing easy. Once you do it once, you'll be surprised how easy it is. Might look a little difficult, but it isn't. Now for sure what we want to do is radius corner going in. That inside corner needs a radius. And that's one of the oldest tricks in a book for making a nice canopy, is to get that nice little notch in there. And it's not that difficult to do. You can see it took me about 20 minutes to do it, 15 minutes. Keep folding the sandpaper over in different spots so you get fresh grit out on there. Try to get a nice little radius in there. Now, we can lock the canopy in this way. Canopy almost snaps in now. We don't even have to worry about it. It actually can snap and click in. It almost can... No, not quite. Okay, we want to look and see, obviously, that the canopy's in the middle, that it's straight, that it's in a position we want it in. Just want to get some of the fuzzies off of here. Get that black line off of there too. We're done with that black line. That served its purpose. We can get that off of there. By the way, if you don't get those ink lines off, these permanent marker pens, after you're done painting the plane, sometimes they'll come up right through the finish, especially if they're red. For some reason, the red dye, the red ink is just crazy. It just comes right back. Try to radius this up a little bit. Okay. Next step will be to get that little notch out for the pilot and see how far we have to sink him in rather than bump his head on the top of the canopy. the things you got to make sure you do when you make the canopy, if you're not familiar with this, you cannot make it airtight. If you make it airtight and don't leave a pinhole to atmosphere, the moisture in air will just go crazy on you. You'll never be able to get the moisture out. So you want to have a pinhole out to, hopefully, to the middle of the fuselage. And what I found is a good way, if you don't put that pinhole in there, and you leave it big enough, say you leave it the size of an 1/8-inch hole, all the dust from inside the plane, from sanding it and final sanding it, is going to wind up inside your canopy. So what I do is I put a little coffee filter in between. Take a coffee filter and make a piece the size of maybe a penny, and glue it so air can get through there into the canopy, but needless to say, no balls of dust. And many an expert pilot, you could look inside the canopy and see balls of dust, and you know they forgot to do that. Okay, we're going to start just roughly gouging out old Mr. Pilot here. The same way we made the ditch. We'll just gouge it out. Get a relatively new sharp blade. This is why it's good to leave all the extra wood around the canopy when you do this. It keeps it straight too. You don't wind up with the thing half-ass crazy on you. Remember, we got to go down about 1/4 of an inch now. Now we can just kind of chunk this out. We want to get it all hollow anyway, even though all we really need is a ditch, because this pilot obviously is hollow. Rather than having a ditch, I'd much rather have something like this. Now we don't want to lower him in there too much, we just want to get him down there enough that he doesn't hit his head on the canopy, but we don't want to get him down so only the tip of his helmet is showing out of the cockpit either. So we'll just use a trial and error method, just gouge it out a little bit, try him, gouge it out a little, try it. Get an idea how much we have out here already. Okay, Mr. Pilot, get in there. And we've got to go about, he's still hitting his head. Got another 1/8 inch. Okay, we got Bonzo in his little compartment there. We'll do a test fit on the canopy. And we can see if his head clears, which it does just about nice. Enough of him sticks up, just about perfect from the side view. Now from this we're going to start grinding in a dashboard, an angle for the dashboard. That's the next step. I'm going to try to get about a 30-degree angle on this. I don't know if you can see, but I have a little dashboard pseudo dashboard made up. Okay. Okay, what we did is we made up a little plywood dashboard that fits in the aeroplane. And we got some of those paper instruments. This is all junk I accumulate. Okay, then we cut the exact shape of the dashboard out of 400 sandpaper, which will give it a pretty realistic look. And what we want to do is cut holes in the wet and dry sandpaper for the instruments. And what I did, I took a piece of copper tubing and sharpened it like a razor blade. And that copper tubing is the same diameter as the instruments. So now we can just go through and let's hope we can get a nice cut out of it. This is not sharp enough right now. So I'll just use this to mark them. And I'll cut it with a razor blade. You can see we got the things marked. Now I may be able to sharpen this up a little bit. It's not sharp enough. May be able to cut right through that. See if I can cut right through this with a razor blade. Yeah, we'll do this by hand. This will be quicker. And we're just cutting on the dotted line. Then of course we'll mark the plywood, glue the instruments to the plywood, and then lay this over the top. This will be like a cover. What I'm doing is truing up the edges of the hole. Of course this one slipped in. Getting the holes perfectly round. Now what we did, we marked the little circles on the piece of plywood. I don't know if you can see that. Now we'll glue the instruments into them and then put this piece right on top of it, leaving the instruments exposed. And first we'll put a little piece of plastic or Scotch tape or something there, so it looks kind of like everything belongs there. And I don't remember now if hot stuff was good for holding paper to wood. We'll find out. And I want to get all the instruments straight up and down. Okay, there's one. Now I'll take the sheet and cut out another one, and I'll just go right down the list here. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. That's what it looks like when you have one on. Here's the little instrument panel. Here's the little cover that's going to go over the top of it. Starting to get some detail on the dashboard. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Flying dashboard. Got some little pinheads and some little dots on there. You have to be a little bit of an artist here to mix these colors up. Get some fades. Trick is not to make all the colors the same. Give it a little texture. The more little details you can put on here, of course, the nicer it's going to be. And you got to be just like a kind of an artist, I guess. Keep cleaning a brush and putting your details in. And what you do is take and put over all the instruments. You want them to be shiny, so there's a contrast between the dull sandpaper and the shiny instrument face. I'm taking some clear lacquer now and just brushing it in there, letting it dry nice and shiny. This will leave the instrument faces looking like they're glass. About 4 or 5 coats of that will have a nice glass-like look. This is just plain old acrylic lacquer. I'm going right over the instrument faces. Okay, now we're going to have to put that aside to dry. Let's see if you can see the shine off the instrument faces there. You can see that against the dull sandpaper it makes a nice contrast. Alright, so we're going to put this aside to dry now and start working on the interior here. Alright, we're going to do a little more cockpit detail today. This is the day before the flushing contest, so I'm not going to have much time to work today, but we'll try to get a little work done on the dashboard. just painting up the little cockpit area here with some flat black enamel. We can get this to dry today while we're outside working on the fields for the flushing contest. And the neck with all this using enamel stuff is, and I guess you probably could use dope, I just don't have any small drawers of colors I need. It's always waiting for it to dry that takes so long. What I'm going to do is mix up some zinc chromate, which is the color that goes inside the canopy. And that's usually, what's the number of this color? Well, this color is zinc chromate, but it's not green, it's not yellow enough. And what I do to keep inside the cockpit flat, we'll put a little bit of talcum powder in with the paint. Usually about half and half, yellow and green will do it. That's still not the right color. I'll put a little bit of white in this and see if it makes any difference. Zinc chromate is the color that you see inside of aluminum airplanes because they zinc chromate the aluminum before they paint it. That looks a little bit better. Now, when you've mixed that, just like you're making sanding seal, I'll put a little bit of talcum powder in it. And this is going to make like a little paste. It's going to be kind of slimy too, but this will just be enough paint, I think, just to do the inside of the cockpit. Yeah, that's about the right color. I don't know if you can see this on a video camera, but if not, just go down to a local airport and buy a can of zinc chromate and take a look at the color. It's like a yellow-green, and that's the color most aluminum airplanes would be on the inside. And if you just get it like paste, usually now the reason for this is we're going to put rivet heads inside the cockpit, and this is going to allow us just enough of a surface over the balsa wood that we can press in some rivet heads with tubing ends and put a little detail in there. That's about what we want. And if you just paint this on, now try not to get it in the trough. That's the whole trick here, is not to get it in the trough, because you want to have the glue go in the trough. And again, the reason for doing this is we're going to be out the whole day working on a flying field, get ready for the flushing contest. And I want this to be drying while I'm out there, so I've gotten up at about 5:30 this morning, so this could be drying while I'm out, and then tonight maybe I can work on it a while once I get all the chores done. Get right up behind the dashboard. Now, like I said before, I think you could get away with using a little drop of acetone in this to thin it out. I think you could get away with using dope or lacquer for this job, but the enamel for some reason always covers in one coat, and I like that. It doesn't. You don't see the grain. And when you get a nice layer of it on there, now you can just take a little bit of acetone, and that'll help get rid of the brush strokes. And this should dry to a real dull, flat finish. Now they make these little cans of enamel in dull, flat finish enamel, so if you're buying these specifically for this reason, buy the dull finish ones, because inside of a cockpit you would want all the surfaces to be dull if you want it to really be realistic. Now, if you ever painted royal paints, you know how you just got to keep mixing in a little bit of thinner and using it like a palette. That's about what we're winding up with here. Okay, we're just going to do the back of this now. And all I'm doing now is taking and brushing in a little bit of acetone. Which will help get some of the brush marks out. Now what I'll try to do, I gotta grind the bottom of this pilot, roughen them up so that the glue is going to stick. Maybe we'll try to use epoxy on it. I mean, I've seen a lot of stunt ships where the pilot got loose after a year or so because there was only one drop of glue holding them, and we sure don't want that to happen in our quest for a forever airplane, so to speak. Sure don't want the pilot getting flaky and loose after a year or so. Now, if you're one of these guys that prefers painting the cockpit on, well, you've saved yourself, in this case, about 3 days of work. Probably saved a couple of grams of weight, but when you take it out on the field, you're sure not going to have the same satisfaction as if you have a little guy in there. And like I said, all I'm doing is brushing on a little bit of acetone onto the enamel and trying to work out the brush strokes. I'm on a good tape there. Don't ruin that tape. That's a canopy tape. This is how much we've got done on a pilot so far. We got back the custom header that Craig Gunder made. I have to drill and fit this custom header yet. This is a custom made deal. This will let me get a little more done here. We can move on to a couple new steps. We're just about finished with the canopy. I'm going to try to finish that up today. And once I'm done with the canopy, this paint should be dry by now. I'm going to try to final hollow out all this area in here. Get that all taken care of. He's about ready to go. Got a lot of little details in here, little ribs and little rivet heads and stuff. Well, what I do, I take 600 sandpaper and just dull out the paint. This is the second coat of green. This will make it dull. So obviously we don't want anything shiny inside the cockpit. I just 600 it out, do all the areas inside the cockpit, then I'll go over the rivet heads again. This will help make it a little bit dull too. If you do have a little flaw, you won't be able to pick it up right away. It gives it a very realistic appearance. I'm just doing, wherever I painted a dot of a rivet head, I'm taking an ice pick that's been sharpened to a point and making a little indentation. So it's a three-dimensional, plus it has the shaded paint color. This is a pretty easy way to get some cockpit detail in there. But one thing you don't want to have is just a flat sheet of wood. And you don't want anything shiny inside the cockpit. Everything should be dull. A little bit of talcum powder in the paint helps that. I've also taken some of the rivet heads and gone around them with a piece of copper tubing. Now the first thing is you have to take the copper tubing and sharpen it to a razor blade edge before you go digging in there. Sharpen that thing up to a razor blade and you'll have a good chance of really making realistic looking rivet heads. Now I know half of the people out there saying, I just paint on a cockpit and that's it. Guys won the Nats with painted on cockpits and all that stuff, but I still like cockpits. So if you don't need this, well, just go ahead and paint something on there. But this is part of what I enjoy about the hobby. And you'll always notice if you have a nice cockpit in your plane, you'll always get a little more attention out at appearance row or out at the field. And it really doesn't take that much extra time. Just some little tricks involved in doing it. If I can pass some of them on to you, well, great. All the Russian and Chinese planes, all the planes at the World Championships had nice cockpits. Billy Warwood's planes always have nice cockpits, so I guess there's a lesson in there somewhere. I was carving out the last of the little piece under the canopy. I don't know if you can see that. Just left a little block of wood under the pilot. Getting the final hollowing done underneath this. Now we'll get the thing smooth sanded. What we have is a piece of sandpaper. That's sticky back sandpaper on a piece of styrofoam. I like to see the finish on the inside of the block the same as on the outside, nice and smooth. I'm finishing up the inside of the blocks with 320. I don't know how well you can see the inside of these blocks, but they're finished just like the outside of the plane. I'll smooth sand them out. Trying to get every last little bit of weight out of here. This way we can put the weight into something that's going to do some work for us. Or look nice, like paint. We'll put it into a little more useful stuff like structure. Just having a fat block really doesn't do anything. And what I do is the spots where I think the block is starting to get thin, I mark them like so. And that just lets me stay away from that now. Because that's getting thin. I left the block a little extra thick up by the nose. Maybe up by the nose it's about 1/16 more than in the back. In the back I try to get every little drop of extra weight out of the back. As soon as I finish sanding this, we'll be ready to put the canopy on permanently. I put the air vent hole in there. We're going to be ready to put the canopy on. Now what we're doing now, we got to make sure we have a pinhole somewhere in this canopy. And on the bottom side, I'm going to take a small piece of this coffee filter. You can see that pinhole right there. I'm going to take a little piece of this coffee filter, cut it out, and glue it over there. Now, in case you're not familiar with how canopies get made and things like that, this coffee filter is going to keep the sawdust that's inside the plane, no matter what you do, from getting into the canopy later on in the life of the plane. So I just put a little coat of cement and you just need a small piece. All you need is one pinhole to atmosphere. Now I know you see models where you see the canopy getting all fogged up and then a half hour later it's not fogged up. Well, that's part of the reason. The other thing this does, if you ever have to transport your plane on an airliner, and I won't mention any names, but I know some very prominent model that had his canopy explode when they put it in the belly of the jet and flew it overseas. But I won't tell nobody. I'll keep it a secret. I'll take it to the grave with me. I'm just putting a little cement underneath the cockpit here, underneath the canopy. What I want that to do is just, there's a thin spot in the wood right there, and I got one right here. This will kind of stiffen up the wood. Cement is good stuff to have for various little jobs that you need it for. Okay. And next step for me is I'm going to, first off, get all the dust off the table, number one, because you don't want to trap dust inside the canopy. Nothing is more aggravating than having dust inside the canopy. What I do, I take the canopy upstairs in hot water, and that gets all the static off. Now I'm just taking it where we have that enamel. There's some little drops that have gone through into the little trough we cut for the canopy. This trough, in case you can't see it, is about a 1/16 of an inch thick. Now we want to start fitting this up, make sure we got a good fit on it. After cleaning the canopy, it's still got dust on it. And he did it again. And all the dust off the inside. That dust really does get aggravating after a while. And one of the things I try to do on this canopy is make it dull and lifelike instead of shiny. You really don't want to paint the pilot's helmet with gloss paint or inside the canopy with gloss. It's not going to look really realistic. A real airplane doesn't have a real high gloss interior. The sun would reflect in a pilot's eyes. Let's see how that starts to look. And the only problem we seem to have is his shoulders don't seem to be happy. They're sticking out the canopy a little bit. Have to fill them in. Not a bad fit. Okay, we got to trim the front just a little bit. Front is the only spot that's going to need trimming on this. We got this block really thin on the bottom. When you hold it up to a light bulb, you can almost see right through it. Top block without that plastic canopy weighed just under 20 grams. So we did a good job of keeping the weight down on this component part. Didn't do a good job of keeping the dust out of this thing. And what's usually in order here is just keep trial fitting it until you've got a nice notch and that canopy will almost sit there by itself. Well, it's starting to look pretty decent. I'll come up on this side a little bit. You can actually obviously use the canopy itself to trace out the edge of the trough. We'll be done another hour or so. We'll be finished with the canopy area. We'll actually be finished with the fuselage and we'll start on the wings now. This part of the body is, you obviously could apply this to any ship that you wanted a canopy on. The wings on this ship are going to be foam. We're going to have the gear mounted in the wing. We're going to be making up wheel pants for the ship. We'll go into a lot of little detail on that coming up. A lot of this stuff like this is just time consuming, and if you're willing to just sit down and relax, now for me this is good therapy. Just my life at the shop is pretty busy and I enjoy coming home and working on this. And when we actually put this canopy down, we want to make sure the block is on a flat table. That's why we've taken all the blankets and things off the table. Okay, we've got that fitting in there really nice. In fact, that actually sits by, jumps out. As he says, it fits by itself. Okay. I'm going to take and clean that canopy upstairs and come back down and glue it on. Alright, I guess we're ready to really glue it on right now. What I'm using is thick Zap-A-Gap. You just make a little fillet right around the trough, which will hold it in. I'm trying to keep it nice and flat on the table so we don't get a bow, make a banana out of the top block. Now the way I did this, the canopy is actually pressing down on the pilot's shoulders, so we've got a little bit of extra strength in the pilot. Nothing more embarrassing than having the pilot get loose. When Gene Schaefer had a plane, the pilot's head came loose after a while. That's really embarrassing. Embarrassing moments in stunt history. And it's real easy. Now all we got to do is fill up the little gap between the canopy and the... We've got that nice little ditch. We just fill that ditch with hot stuff. Now from this point on, we're going to cover the canopy with masking tape so that we avoid scratching it up and beating the hell out of it. The other thing we want to do is every time we paint the canopy, or paint up to the canopy, we'll move the tape up just about the thickness of a pen line. And by doing that, we won't get an edge when we peel up the last piece of tape to put the clear on the plane. We won't get that giant step. The ultimate goal here is to get the plane so you can't tell where the canopy ends and the wood begins. You just run your hand over it and it feels like it's all made out of one piece of marble. And of course there's very few people except the people that have done this over and over and over that ever get that effect. On Ski's plane, the lace maker, if you hold your eyes closed and rub your hand on the canopy, you can't tell where the canopy ends. The balsa wood begins. It's really laid in there nice. And we'll tape off just high enough on the canopy now that we won't see the seam here. Now on Ski's plane, what he did was even nice, is when he made the fillet out of epoxylite, he made the epoxylite tinted with black dye so that you couldn't see any that sneaked up under the canopy. Since we're using hot stuff here, I don't think you're gonna have that problem, I hope. Just make a nice fillet around it. Try to avoid using too much kicker so it doesn't bubble up. And we got the canopy vented to atmosphere now. And whenever I take the Red Baron outside, of course, because it's in the cellar here all the time, the canopy always fogs right up instantly. The main thing here is I want to seal this. I don't want to get any dust in there while I'm working on it. I think that's in there pretty straight. I see it's popping milk right here. Main thing is to seal this. Get this thing sealed here because I don't want to, obviously I don't want a lot of dust getting in here while I'm working on the model. Gotta get a little extra glue down by his shoulder there. Oh, I always put, when I'm doing a job like this, I always take the finest piece of Teflon tube so that I don't get big globs of CA everywhere. I gotta candle this to see if I have enough. Make sure that's sealed. Okay, next step is we're going to tape this off. I'm trying to tape this off about 3/30 of an inch up off the joint, so I can actually build a little fillet of probably epoxylate. I'll see what I use on this around the canopy here. All this is here for is to protect the canopy while we're working on the plane. And each time we put some paint, a filler or anything on here, we want to move this just a little bit. I like to use 2 layers of tape. And of course, each time we move this tape, this line is going to change just a little tiny bit. Don't put the tape on and leave it on for the whole construction of the plane, and then think that when you come back and you're finished with this, you're going to have a beautiful line there, because it'll never happen. Okay, we got that pretty solid. What I have is a piece of 1/4 inch wood with a piece of 320, and it's radiused on one end. And I'm trying to build up a little radius in there, pick out the high spots, get a little radius going on that. And you go right up to the tape, but obviously don't try not to sand through the tape. We're just trying to build up a little fillet here with this stuff. And just keep, see it's radius on one side, just keep moving it because you're going to build up a stripe of material it takes off. Just move it down. 1/16 of an inch and you're ready to go back to work. And it's a lot more convenient doing this with a block in your hand than it is when you have the plane in one piece. It's all assembled and everything and you're trying to work on a cockpit. Holy crow. You got to be an octopus to get in at it. Especially if you got a big gut like I do hanging out. Just keep picking away at the high spots. Getting that nice fillet, like I said, around the cockpit. That's really a pro touch. The guys that are good builders are all going to know it. Not necessarily the appearance judges, but there's people that know that. And they will respect you for that effort. Alright, so you know the first time through there's going to be nothing but high spots. Second or third time we go through this operation, we're going to have less and less until eventually we get a reasonable radius in there. The trick is keep the sandpaper on the dowel constantly turned. Keep moving it and you'll get a new fresh spot of sandpaper each time. Eventually you'll see the whole area will be dull and there'll be no low shiny spots. And you'll have knocked down all the mountains and you'll have that really nice radius right at the edge of the cockpit. And it takes time. This stuff is not quick. I've got a lot of hours into this body already. And if craftsmanship and workmanship means something to you, well, then this is going to be important. We got about 3 coats of hot stuff, thick hot stuff on here, and we're just final sanding out the fillet again with the radius block. And we'll pull off the tape and replace the tape because we're feathering out the edge of this tape right now. Now we have the fillet all sanded out now, nice and smooth. They took the tape off. I'm going to move the tape up just the thickness of, oh geez, just the slightest little bit. always a bit of a pain in the ass to do the back end of the canopy. I don't know why the tape never wants to bend just right. If you start in the middle and work your way back, it seems to be a little bit easier. Now, there's no reason for using this white tape other than the fact that I had it laying around. And since I moved this tape 20, 30 times by the time the plane is finished, I only use that tape once. One sanding or doping or hot stuff or whatever, and that tape is history. We go on to another roll. Alright, so we'll just cover this back up. We're basically done with the canopy for now. Remember, every time you move the tape, just go up the thickness of, maybe a pencil line, and you'll, instead of having one big step, you'll wind up with a bunch of little tiny steps, and the last time you take the tape off, you'll just have that one little step to sand out. Now we're about at the end of the construction of the fuselage. You see we wind up with four major components. A top block with a canopy and all the detail on it. The rudder, the fairing in the rudder. The little scoop that'll be on the top of the spinner. The body crutch. All geodetic formers. Tail wheel already mounted. And a bottom block with the hole for the pipe and a cowling. This is the four basic parts of the fuselage. Breathing too much sawdust. And we're about ready to move on to the next phase of construction. Before I actually put this away, I'm probably going to want to put some black dope inside that bottom block and inside the bottom of the fuselage, so it'll be easier to get at it now than after the plane is all painted. Just kind of pan through this if there's anything you haven't seen, or got the fillet finished on the just panning around the shop a little bit. That's what's left of 80 gallons of fuel here at the end of the season. We'll finish that off. It's only the second week in October right now. 80 gallons of fuel this summer. The Red Baron, the Cardinal, Tradition, they're all sitting out there. This is just an overall view of the shop, the kind of conditions I work under. You can see I have the monitor for the TV up there too. I'm putting a coat of black sig, like I said earlier in the video, inside all these surfaces. I'm going to do inside the bottom block and inside the fuselage. It's just easier to do this now than later. I've got about 5 coats of clear in here now. Sanded a little bit between each coat. This is the part of the plane that if you get a tank leak or some dripping and drooling, this will protect it a little bit. A piece of tubing comes off or something crazy like that. Plus, when you're putting the paint on with a brush instead of a spray gun, you get a really good solid coat. When you spray it on, you usually wind up getting half thinner, so this hopefully will protect it. One coat will be plenty. Seen a lot of good planes get ruined because they didn't have the tank compartment fuel proofed well enough, and even though these planes don't leak a lot of fuel up around the nose of the plane, because of the pipe spitting the oil out the back. I still want the insurance of having, knowing that I'm not going to lose this airplane or the nose isn't going to start falling apart because I got a little bit of fuel in there. We're just starting to do the bottom block now. We'll get around here. Be a lot easier and a lot more productive doing it now than later on. Again, I don't want to get any dope on the surface that's going to be joined. Just want to keep the dope on the surface that we will not have really easy access to once the plane is assembled. Don't forget, this bottom block will be on here permanently. We won't really be able to get in here other than with a brush with a dowel taped to it or something so we can shove it in there. We won't be able to get a nice neat job like this. And I know what some people are probably saying. They're saying, who the hell is going to see inside this body? Well, I'm going to see inside of it. And I think there's good enough reason to do a good job everywhere, inside and out. I bet you if you take Ski's plane apart or Stan Powell's or Joe Reinhardt's and look inside, I bet you it's neat as a pin inside. You ever see when somebody's plane crashes and you run over and look inside of it and it looks like a toilet? Well, I've seen a few of those and I don't want to be one of those. And that's not an ego trip, that's I just don't want it, period. There's an old poem I remember as a kid. My father was alive, he used to tell it to me. Each unseen and hidden part, 'cause the gods see everywhere. So if the gods are looking at inside this body right now, the shame of the whole thing is a lot of times when they do an appearance judging of planes at local contests or even in nats, the people doing them do it in a hurry. They have to because of time restraint and never really get to notice the fine detail work on some of the planes. Some of them have really slipped by unnoticed. Ski's plane is being one of them. He got the concourse one year, but it slipped by a couple other times. But of course that's the pilots voting on that, so can't expect too many of them to really spend the whole day looking at your plane. Something's got to jump out at them and make them look at it. Like cockpit detail or little touches like this.
Now we didn't put the paint any further forward than where you see because I want to get the wing in first and put the doublers in and then paint right over that whole area. I'd only be getting extra paint if I did that. I didn't want to paint anything up in the nose until we get the whole nose glassed in around the inside. I'll paint the inside all at once.
Now I'm hoping this is going to help anybody that's got a tune pipe plane. trying to make one. Make it a little easier for them to figure out how it's done. Certainly nothing too ultra original about this, but it does take a little bit of thought. And this is the end of the fuselage part of this video. When we start this video, the next tape, we're going to be starting with the wing and tail construction. This is the end of the fuselage part, so there should be roughly 6 hours of video on building a body. This has taken us about 70 hours of shop time to get where we are right now. The wing and tail usually goes pretty fast. It's taken a little longer than necessary because we've had to plan each step out on this. But, and the radial mount is a new thing even for me. The rubber mount. We've made a lot of parts by hand and made templates for everything. So that usually is going to consume a little more time than if you do it the regular way. Again, the next tape, if you're only interested in the fuselage, this video is over. The rest of the tape is going to deal with sheeting the wing, putting the wing in the body, the tail, putting the controls in, and the finish, and we're probably even going to try to get some trim plates on this guy. This has certainly been an interesting video for me. If you haven't seen the Nobler video, there's still a lot of tips on the Nobler video that might be real helpful. You might want to look at them. There's our little filter. Some of the spots where we've got the block tooth in, boy, Al Ray would be proud of that. Canopy. A little fillet around the canopy. See how the rudder dovetails in there? There's the joint in the block. The grain of the rudder goes up on an angle, so it gives it some strength. All the geodetic form is in there. Center line for the fuselage. Carbon fiber bracing, tank floor on a 30-degree angle, rubber mounts are already in there, carbon fiber holding the nose ring mount. Remember, that nose ring is really part of the motor mount. Little braces holding in the tank hold down strap. This is a Casimanato neat idea. Find out if the tank falls out on a first flight. Maybe we'll re-edit this video and say, Kazi, your problem. Oh, we'll try it once. Bottom pipe mount. Got a good glue bead in every angle and every corner in here because that's the tank box.
See that old Velcro